dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need the communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga polisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga polisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan diin ng kahalagahan ng polisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan!
In need of references for your research? Do you want a digital library that you can access for free anytime and anywhere? You don't have to look far. SERPI is here for you. SERPI is an online database of socioeconomic materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, government agencies, research and academic institutions, and international organizations based in the Philippines. It is the country's first online repository of socioeconomic information, created for policymakers and development practitioners, researchers, educators, and students. To access SERPI, just visit the PIDS website and click the SERPI widget under the Databases tab, or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERPI has a wide variety of materials such as journal articles, books, research papers, working papers, policy notes, audiovisual materials, and more. As of 2022, SERPI has more than 60 partner institutions contributing knowledge resources to the database. SERPI provides a comprehensive coverage of references encompassing 22 research themes: labor and education, gender and development, poverty, technology and innovation, trade and industry, and many more. On the enhanced website of SERPI, you can filter your research by keyword or author, publication type, research theme, or year published, all at the same time. SERPI has more than 7,000 publications and audiovisual materials that you can access and download for free. What are you waiting for? Visit SERPI now. Socioeconomic Research Portal for the Philippines, innovating knowledge exchange and policy research.
So what is PIDS? For over 40 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, has been the country's foremost socioeconomic think tank. It conducts rigorous and objective policy research and analyses that help the government in crafting relevant policies, plans, and programs in support of the country's long-term vision and development goals. PIDS pursues its mandate through three basic programs: research, dissemination, and outreach. Through its research program, PIDS identifies and prioritizes studies, develops proposals, and conducts research on priority areas. The results of these studies are then disseminated through different platforms, publications, online resources, PIDS Corner, seminars, and the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, held every September. To shed light on key policy issues, the advice and expertise of the Institute's research fellows are also sought by policymakers, government agencies, private sector, and civil society. Since 1977, PIDS has completed numerous policy studies on a wide range of development topics. This brand of service has then translated to policies and programs that have improved the lives of every Filipino. Philippine Institute for Development Studies, service through policy research.
Dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need the communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga polisiya at programa ng pamalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga polisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan diin ang kahalagahan ng polisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan.
In need of references for your research? Do you want a digital library that you can access for free anytime and anywhere? You don't have to look far. SERPI is here for you. SERPI is an online database of socioeconomic materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, government agencies, research and academic institutions, and international organizations based in the Philippines. It is the country's first online repository of socioeconomic information, created for policymakers and development practitioners, researchers, educators, and students. To access SERPI, just visit the PIDS website and click the SERPI widget under the Databases tab, or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERPI has a wide variety of materials such as journal articles, books, research papers, working papers, policy notes, audiovisual materials, and more. As of 2022, SERPI has more than 60 partner institutions contributing knowledge resources to the database. SERPI provides a comprehensive coverage of references encompassing 22 research themes: labor and education, gender and development, poverty, technology and innovation, trade and industry, and many more. On the enhanced website of SERPI, you can filter your research by keyword or author, publication type, research theme, or year published, all at the same time. SERPI has more than 7,000 publications and audiovisual materials that you can access and download for free. What are you waiting for? Visit SERPI now. Socioeconomic Research Portal for the Philippines, innovating knowledge exchange and policy research.
So what is PIDS? For over 40 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, has been the country's foremost socioeconomic think tank. It conducts rigorous and objective policy research and analyses that help the government in crafting relevant policies, plans, and programs in support of the country's long-term vision and development goals. PIDS pursues its mandate through three basic programs: research, dissemination, and outreach. Through its research program, PIDS identifies and prioritizes studies, develops proposals, and conducts research on priority areas. The results of these studies are then disseminated through different platforms, publications, online resources, PIDS Corner, seminars, and the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, held every September. To To shed light on key policy issues, the advice and expertise of the Institute's research fellows are also sought by policymakers, government agencies, private sector, and civil society. Since 1977, PIDS has completed numerous policy studies on a wide range of development topics. This brand of service has then translated to policies and programs that have improved the lives of every Filipino. Philippine Institute for Development Studies, service through policy research.
Welcome to the PIDS webinar series. Before we start our virtual event, we have some reminders. For attendees, your microphone is automatically muted upon entry. If you wish to join the discussion, click the Q&A icon, type your question, and click send. For Facebook viewers, you may send your question using the comment section. Remember to keep your questions concise and direct to the point. We will screen all questions to ensure that they are relevant to the webinar topic and the presentation. The moderator will read the questions during the open forum and cover as many as possible depending on the available time. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed on the PIDS and SERPI Facebook pages. The recording will also be made publicly available on the PIDS YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your active participation.
Morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on labor inclusivity and skilled labor mobility in the Philippines and ASEAN region. I am Sonny Domingo, and I'll be your host and moderator for this morning. Today, we feature two very interesting studies by PIDS, which explore labor inclusivity and skilled labor mobility in the Philippines and ASEAN. These issues are relevant given the significant number of overseas Filipino workers that we have and the ASEAN economic community fostering the mobility of skilled professionals in the region. The first study examines how the mutual recognition arrangements, or MRAs, of the ASEAN economic community facilitate the movement of skilled professionals and how this impacts the quality of professional services in the Philippines. While the second study investigates the impact of labor and immigration on wages, employment, and production in both capital-intensive and labor-intensive sectors. Join us as we deepen our understanding on the challenges and opportunities in promoting labor inclusivity and mobility. Before we begin, we invite you to actively engage in today's discussions. Feel free to ask questions, share your thoughts, and interact with our panelists through the Q&A box in Zoom or the comment section on Facebook Live. Now, to formally start our program, let us welcome PIDS President Dr. Aniceto Orbeta Jr. to give his opening remarks. Dr. Orbeta?
Good morning to all our participants here in Zoom and those watching via the PIDS and SERPI Facebook pages. Welcome to our second public webinar this month titled Labor Inclusivity and Skilled Labor Mobility in the Philippines and ASEAN Region. Before we start, allow me to greet the following esteemed officials. Department of Foreign Affairs Assistant Secretary Robert Ferrer, Department of Education, Bureau of Education Assessment Director Marivic Liano, International Labor Organization Country Director Khalid Hassan, Central Philippine University Office for Institutional Advancement Director Dipna Castigador, Western Mindanao State University Research Development and Evaluation Center Director Rinanti Opida, Pioneer Adhesives Foundation Executive Director Jenny Alfonso, Life Haven Center for Independent Living Executive Director Carla Hinson, ASEAN Society Philippines President Alma Jimenez, and PhilExport Vice President Maria Flor de Risa Leong. I would also like to greet the various representatives from government, academe, private sector, civil society, and media virtually present this morning. Today, we will delve into the findings of two insightful PIDS studies that explore two critical aspects of the Filipino labor mobility, its impact on domestic sphere and the potential within the regional landscape. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, established the ASEAN Economic Community in 2015, aiming to create a single market for goods, services, and skilled labor. Central to our discussions are the mutual recognition arrangements, or MRAs, within this community, which streamline the process for qualified Filipino professionals to work in other member countries. This arrangement presents exciting opportunities for increased job prospects and career advancement. However, unlocking the full potential of MRAs requires navigating significant challenges. Strict domestic regulations within some ASEAN member states can still hinder labor mobility. To maximize benefits, we need to understand how to leverage MRAs to enhance the skills and qualifications of Filipino workers while increasing their labor participation and mobility in the region. The first PIDS study assessing the readiness of Filipino MRA-supported professions to participate in mobility of skilled labor in ASEAN region, based from APEC economies, will be presented by Paolo Rivera, OIC Executive Director of Dr. Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism at the Asian Institute for Management and soon to be Research Fellow at PIDS. This study will explore these challenges and opportunities in detail, focusing on education, experience, access to continuing professional development programs, and how these qualifications compare to MRA requirements. Increased mobility builds upon the existing trend of Filipino professionals seeking work abroad. The Philippines has a large and growing number of overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, whose remittances are a vital source of income for families and the national economy. Recent data from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas revealed that personal remittances from OFWs grew by 3% to $2.9 billion in February 2024, from $2.86 billion in February 2023. However, the impact of labor immigration on domestic labor markets is complex. While it can lead to higher wages for some in high-demand sectors, it can also have unintended consequences. Losing workers with skills that are not easy to replace may potentially impact local productivity and growth. The second study, Inclusivity of Factor Flows in a Labor Surplus Economy Experience of the Philippines, will be presented by Tereso Tullao Jr., University Fellow and Professor Emeritus of Economics of De La Salle University. This study offers valuable insights into the interplay between immigration, foreign direct investments, and inclusivity in the Philippine labor market. Bringing their expertise to the table, we are thrilled to have Commission on Higher Education Commissioner Aldrin Darilag and Litsum Bican Asia Pacific University Professor Michael Angelo Cortez as discussants. Discussing these critical matters and presenting valuable information and learning insights can enlighten and guide policymaking at both local and regional scales. These insights can pave the way for a more dynamic and inclusive labor market, benefiting Filipino workers and the economies they contribute to, both in the Philippines and across Southeast Asia. I look forward to your active participation in discussions following the presentations. Thank you, and I will now give the floor to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Orbeta. Now, before we go to the actual presentations, it's our tradition at PIDS to do a very quick poll before we start everything. So, as mentioned earlier, our discussion will focus on labor inclusivity and skilled labor mobility within the Philippines and ASEAN. With that, the question is, what step should we prioritize to attain equitable access to skilled labor opportunities and inclusive growth, both within the Philippines and the ASEAN? Choose one from the following. Number one, implement targeted education and training programs. Number two, strengthen collaboration with the government, industry, and academe. Number three, craft policies promoting equal opportunity and fair labor practices. And the last one, invest in infrastructure and technology. So we have 4 choices. Choose among them. For those joining us via Zoom, click the link provided in the chat box. And for those in Facebook Live, click the link in the comment section. So again, let me repeat the question. What step should we prioritize to attain equitable access to skilled labor opportunities and inclusive growth, both within the Philippines and ASEAN? Implement targeted education and training programs, strengthen collaboration with the government, industry, and academe, craft policies promoting equal opportunity and fair labor practices, and last one, invest in infrastructure and technology. So choose among the 4, and we'll show you the result of our very quick poll in a while. So I think we have a lot of participants from Zoom and Facebook Live. And on your screen is the result of our quick poll. So most of you answered the second option, which is strengthen collaboration with the government, industry, and academe. This is followed by implementing targeted education and training programs. But I think all the options are needed right now in the country for us to have a more skilled workforce or better equipped workforce, as well as more competitive workforce in the global labor market. All right. So let us now proceed to the presentations for today's webinar. The first study, assessing the readiness of Filipino MRA-supported professions to participate in the mobility of skilled labor in the ASEAN region, lessons for APEC economies, is authored by Asian Institute of Management, Dr. Andrew L. Tan Center for Tourism OIC Executive Director, John Paolo Rivera, and De La Salle University Fellow and Professor Emeritus of Economics, Tereso S. Tullao Jr., as well as the DLSU Ramon V. Del Rosario College of Business Associate Dean Professor Cynthia Cudia. It delves into the mutual recognition arrangements, or MRAs, of the ASEAN Economic Community among ASEAN member states, analyzing the contributions of MRAs in enhancing the quality of professional services in the Philippines through human resource development. We are honored today to have Dr. Rivera as the presenter of the first study. Let me introduce our speaker. Dr. John Paolo Rivera has a comprehensive research portfolio spanning macroeconomics, development economics, management, and tourism. He actively participates in international and local academic conferences and is a prolific author of scientific and technical publications. He teaches at the undergraduate, graduate, and executive levels and does consulting work with both private and public sectors. Dr. Rivera has a doctorate in economics, a master's in economics as well, and a bachelor's in applied economics, all from De La Salle University. He graduated his undergrad magna cum laude. So thank you for joining us today, Dr. Rivera. You now have the virtual floor.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'll be presenting our study titled The Readiness of Filipino MRA-supported Professions for Labor Mobility in ASEAN and RCEP. This study that I'm about to present to you this morning is actually culled from a discussion paper and policy note that we have written for the Philippine Institute for Development Study, PASCN. Originally, the study was titled Assessing the Readiness of Filipino MRA-supported professions to participate in the mobility of skilled labor in the ASEAN region with lessons for APEC economies. The corresponding policy note would also talk about how do we improve human resource through mutual recognition in ASEAN. These studies focus on the role of mutual recognition arrangements in the ASEAN region, particularly for selected professionals that we have in the Philippines. Let me go first to RCEP. So trade negotiations now with RCEP in place go beyond tariffs to cover multiple policy areas that affect trade and investment, both in goods and services, including behind-the-border regulations such as competition policy, government procurement rules, and intellectual property rights, among others. While the RCEP is deemed as the challenger to the Trans-Pacific Partnership in terms of coverage and degree of liberalization, economic cooperation agenda now in RCEP integrates and accounts for existing ASEAN processes, wherein it allows for the expansion of cooperation on areas that are still untouched by existing FTAs. For the rationale and motivation, RCEP now presents an opportunity for participating economies to consolidate rules given overlapping sets of FTAs, such as in the case of trade and services. With RCEP, there's this ASEAN's irreplaceable East Asian centrality, wherein there's this ASEAN's middle power diplomacy, wherein neither China or Japan were assigned to spearhead the negotiations. In fact, it's actually ASEAN who led in the RCEP negotiation. It was ASEAN that actually invited Australia, China, India, Japan, Korea, and New Zealand to join the RCEP negotiations. Therefore, ASEAN's intercession in mobilizing RCEP tempered hostilities among big or giant economies. And at least 65% of all services sector will be fully open to foreign investors with the RCEP, with commitments to increase foreign shareholding limits in various industries, including professional services, information and communication technology, financial services, distribution, and logistics, among others. Meanwhile, in the ASEAN, recently, the Philippines posted significant growth or higher growth rates relative to other neighboring economies, particularly in the ASEAN 6. And this tells us that the ASEAN region, the ASEAN Economic Community, has actually been very proactive in pursuing trade competitiveness, skilled labor mobility, and with the existence of MRAs or mutual recognition arrangements, facilitated mobility of labor throughout the region, provided that there is compliance with these MRAs. But the next question would be, in terms of trade competitiveness, we all know that with liberalization, the reduction or elimination of tariff and non-tariff barriers, we have this deregulation, and with liberalization, we invite foreign players that can expand income and employment among member economies. And likewise, just like any other FTAs, we are responding to external pressures from competition from other economies and from other regional trading blocs. So in terms of skilled labor mobility, guided by the General Agreement on Trade and Services, just to recall, we have 4 modes of supply. Wherein mode 1 is your cross-border transaction, mode 2, consumption abroad, mode 3, commercial presence, and mode 4, the movement of natural person. The movement of natural persons covers natural persons who are either service suppliers, independent professionals, or those who work for a service supplier and who are present in another WTO member to supply a service. And in this study, we focus on mode 4, the movement of natural persons, or MNP, as the anchor to which our study revolves. In terms of MRAs and compliance, okay, that I have mentioned earlier, so the first question you might be asking is, what is an MRA? What are MRAs? Okay, technically speaking, mutual recognition arrangements are framework arrangements established in support of liberalizing and facilitating trade in services. And the objective of entering into a mutual recognition arrangement would be to facilitate the mobility of skilled labor and professionals in the region. Now, I just want to emphasize that MRAs are existent, okay, in the ASEAN region, okay? And it aims to work towards the adoption of best practices on standards and qualifications as far as professionals are concerned. It's like economies are agreeing on what should be the qualifications of a professional. For example, in the Philippines, there are certain qualifications that if a Filipino professional possesses it, then he or she would be eligible to work in another ASEAN member economy wherein the MRA is enforced. Okay? So, as of the moment, there are 8 MRAs in ASEAN covering the following professionals. Okay, so chronologically, according to time, the first MRA is on engineering, nursing, architectural services, surveying qualifications, dental practitioners, medical practitioners, accountancy service, and the most recent among all the MRAs is the MRA on tourism professionals. These MRA frameworks have been formalized formalized among ASEAN member states for the mutual recognition of education and work experiences obtained in these 8 priority sectors, or maybe we should call it the professional sectors. And through this MRAs, or recognition mechanism, there is now equivalence of registration, licensing requirements, reciprocity requirements, among others. And MRAs are able to contribute to the mobility of skilled professionals within the ASEAN region because there is now a standard on the qualifications that are required for me, or for example, me as a professional, to be able to work in another ASEAN member state where the MRA is enforced. So the point of inquiry now that we have, given the existence of these MRA, is to ask whether Filipino professionals with MRA support, these professionals mentioned in the previous slide, are ready to participate in the mobility of skilled professionals in ASEAN. So it's like asking the question, how can we assure, okay, that Filipino professionals under the priority sectors mentioned, okay, are prepared? Are we ready to be part of these MRAs that we signed in? Okay? In terms of education, continuing professional education, licensure examinations, experience, and others, to be compliant with the existing MRAs for each profession. Okay? So it means that are Filipinos capable or already at par, okay, with the requirements, with the standard requirements stipulated in the MRAs. So the scope. In the study that we penned, okay, the study covered the Philippines for the 5 priority sectors, okay, namely accountancy, medicine, architecture, engineering, and tourism. Okay, so we covered this one. And among the professionals that have MRA support, they can be grouped according to professions that are highly regulated, particularly dental, nursing, and medical practitioners. The regulated professions such as accountancy, architecture, and engineering services. Before tourism MRA has been signed, you'll notice that the professions that are under MRA support are those wherein a an individual is required to take a board exam, okay, board exam, because of the strict regulations being implemented in the profession until, okay, here comes an MRA designed for an unregulated profession, particularly on tourism professionals. Okay. Now, why are we talking about this? It's because while the Philippines is deemed as a major supplier of labor to the developed economies around the world, we observe that there is a certain proportion of our labor force categorized as professionals that are being deployed abroad. Okay? And we can see from this chart that 7.1 of the migrant workers from the Philippines in the year 2022 are professionals. You might think that this is a small proportion because it's just 7.1 relative to the 44% of elementary occupations, but this would have key implications on the productivity, on the availability of skills in the Philippines. That's why it's very important for us to manage the distribution of these migrant workers. But with the presence of MRAs, how will this change the picture? Okay. And as we know, we have experienced a pandemic. There are certain social issues that we're currently facing in the Philippines that requires the expertise from our Filipino professionals. However, competition with the international labor market is persistent. The demand for Filipino workers abroad is very high. And at the same time, our labor in the Philippines are attracted to participate in international labor mobility primarily due to wage differential and a host of all other reasons that makes it lucrative for them to work abroad. And as you may remember, during the pandemic, nurses have been migrating abroad to address pandemic situation there. Okay. And it's not because that they want to leave, it's because of the wage differentials, the benefits, the working condition, the difference in working conditions and pay that are available elsewhere. And at the moment, many developed economies have been demanding skilled Filipino workers, not limited to medical workers, but also in accountancy, in engineering, among others, even the unregulated tourism professionals. Now, I would like to bring now the discussion to knowledge capital, and I will explain the link of this one later on. Okay. In terms of knowledge capital or research and development, okay, produced by the different ASEAN member countries and RCEP member economies for accounting, architecture, engineering, medicine, and tourism, let's look at the figure for the Philippines. Compare it to other economies. Now, from this table, we can see that China, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Singapore have been very productive in terms of creating knowledge. Now, if there is one metric that we propose, no, as one measure of knowledge capital is the number of publications in Scopus Index journal. Okay, so the figures that you're seeing on the screen right now are the number of publications in Elsevier Scopus journals, total from 1996 to 2023. And you can see here that the Philippines would need more work in increasing its production of knowledge capital. Now, while you can observe that the figures are in absolute terms, okay, although you can always argue that this can also be expressed as a percentage, right? As a proportion of the academics, the researcher, the research pool, the academic pool, the researcher pool the economy has. Just by looking at the figures in terms of numbers, the Philippines alone indicates that there are certain areas or disciplines that require more research. And why am I heading the direction of research? Okay, let me proceed. Okay, it is because The analysis of MRA can also be viewed from the lens that analyzing MNP, or movement of natural person, and the mobility of skilled workers can be seen through the lens of research and development. Okay. Analysis highlights several major policy relevance, implications, and strategies towards wealth formation through various forms of and levels of training, education, professional development, but it also includes research and development. Why is that so? It's because in the discussion of MRA, it is also of value to emphasize the importance of HRD, of human resource development, as a critical aspect of MRA compliance and competitiveness. Now, you've been hearing different keywords, no? Research and development, human resource development, mutual recognition arrangement. So how do we weave these three constructs together? Okay, so in assessing the readiness of Filipino professionals to participate in movement of natural persons, we have to look at several factors, particularly internal, transnational, and external factors. Okay, in looking at internal or domestic factors, we have this technical context, education, curriculum, training, examination, CPD, experience, accreditation, and so on and so forth. But look, internal factors also captures research and publication. Okay, then you have your transnational issues, even external or regional factors. Okay, and in the study that we have done, we have actually conducted document and literature review and analysis, a validation workshop that gave us the runway to identify issues, challenges, opportunities, and best practices, and at the same time, assess the readiness of Filipino professional in MRA compliance. Are we at par? Are we able to comply with the standards set by the MRAs? And upon knowing that, recommendations to enhance best practices, address challenges of Filipino professionals in MRA compliance could be addressed. Okay? So, key findings. Again, there is this research component, the MRA component, and the movement of natural person. We'll link them together later. So in the study that we have conducted, we have seen that MRAs, okay, have compelled professionals to continuously improve on their respective crafts. Okay, the standards in the MRA are steep, okay, because it's a collection of the different standards implemented by ASEAN member economies of varying developmental levels. Okay, how did it compel professionals to continuously improve? It's because if you want to migrate, if you want to participate in MNP, you have to meet these standards. But how can you meet the standards? Okay, you need to make investments in your human capital. Okay, like for example, requirements stipulated in MRAs compelled sending countries like the Philippines to upgrade their educational systems, training, accreditation, certifications, licensing, even professional regulatory frameworks to enforce a higher standard in the conduct of professional service. So these metrics, okay, these facets allow Filipinos, Filipino professionals with MRA support to be able to improve, upgrade the current level of training that we have. And with that, you are able to approach closer, okay, the steep requirements of MRAs. And I'm not even talking about domestic regulations, because economies can still impose domestic regulations on behalf of or on top of these MRAs. Okay. Now, while we saw that Filipino professionals are ready to participate in the mobility of labor in the region, okay, some work still has to be done. Okay. And in talking about the MRAs, okay, we found that no single ASEAN member state serves as a benchmark for best practice. And this has been driven by domestic regulations. Okay. And in ASEAN also, the varying levels of development among ASEAN member states, there are those who are not willing to relinquish full control over their professional standards. They still have domestic regulations. They still have this standard that were not included in the MRA, but they are imposing it. Okay? So, I'm already trying to reach the level of MRA, and then there is still another layer of domestic regulation, all the more that you need to be able to upgrade your skills, your qualifications, so that you fit the bill. Okay? And in terms, no, on the aspects of education, curriculum, training, assessment and examination, accreditation, and certification and licensing, we can see that Filipino professionals are ready. Okay? While they are ready, okay, the preparation, the enhancement of qualifications must be continuous. Therefore, where will this come from? Okay? Our argument here is that the generation of knowledge through research stimulates technological development, the creation of better practices, new practices that upgrade human resource practices. To be able to upgrade everything that we know now, it has to emanate from research. And if we are not producing that much research, it would be very challenging for us to be able to upgrade our human resource practices. Our technological development would find it slow to catch up with the increasing demands, the increasing qualifications being set at the international labor market. Okay. So more of the findings that we have. So to sustain this readiness, there is a need to continuously augment and improve on the education of faculties handling professional degree in degree programs. Not only through continuing professional development, but also through research and publication. So we're trying to address the root cause here. Okay? To continuously enhance our professional degree programs, CPD is not just the tool to be able to make this happen. It has to be accompanied by research and publication, because research and publication would help us find new ways of doing things. Okay? But not to undermine CPD. Okay? However, the positioning of CPD have to be viewed from a different lens. CPD is usually regulatory. Okay? You need this total number of points for you to be able to renew your professional license. Fine. Okay. However, with the rise of MRAs, with the rising standards of qualification, other than being regulatory, CPDs can also be developmental. Okay. And how can CPDs be more developmental? Okay. We go beyond the point system. We can touch on the value, the skill augmenting process of CPDs, rather than just to serve as a requirement to renew professional license. Okay. Also, training programs have to be qualified. Training programs have to be validated. Okay. If you want to get a CPD, the training program has to be more than listening or sitting, no, at going to a hotel, sitting somewhere, listening, and then get your certificate afterwards. We can go beyond that. Okay. And that is being developmental. Going back to research, okay, many would criticize academics. Huh? Your research are not practicable, but okay, it's too academic. It's too academic. But then, research outputs is the way to generate patents, innovations, new methodologies that can contribute to the development of society in the long run. There is value. While MRAs, the qualifications are steep, there are still domestic regulations, then it is up to us to be able to match that standard being imposed at the regional level. But to be able to increase that standard, it has to emanate from research, from technology, from R&D. There will be new patents, new ways, new and better ways of doing things would be able to allow the enhancement of HRD through R&D. We have to see research beyond what it is, but we have to see research and development in such a way that this is our key to find new ways of doing things. So we are not stuck, okay, in the old ways of doing things, which most of them have been rendered obsolete by the crisis that we have experienced before, rendered obsolete by technology, and it just doesn't work anymore. It has to change because the world is also changing. MRAs are here, standards are increasing. If we will not change the standard, we would be left behind. Even if we are ready now, readiness would change. The ball game can change anytime. Technology is changing too fast. So what's the moral of the story? Okay, so there is a link. Okay, we can now view MRAs, okay, through the lens of finding the connection, that link between MRAs and HRD through the development of social and knowledge capital. Okay, and here comes the role of higher education. Okay, for example, at the regional level, like in ASEAN, RCEP, in APEC, okay, there should be benchmarking of curriculum, but even teaching pedagogies, learning standards would have to be benchmarked because we are agreeing all the more with RCEP. Okay, I will not be surprised if RCEP economies would also enter into mutual recognition arrangements. It's very liberal. Mobility has become much easier, okay, because of these facilities. However, higher standards are imposed. And how do we do this? Okay, so the coming together of regulators and professional organizations should complement the discussion of higher educational institutions so that together they can strengthen program design, delivery, quality control of professional degree programs, the entire facets of education, so that we are able to be at par with our neighboring economies, member economies in regional trading blocs, wherein the Philippines is a member, okay? Because we want to take advantage of opportunities that are incorporated in these FTAs that we are part of. So how do we do this? Okay, here we have a few recommendations. Okay, there's a need to reform domestic regulations and liberalize professions. So when we say liberalizing professions, no, on professions where the Philippines has inadequate supply of labor, okay, it can stimulate the skill-based growth as more professionals can now take part in key sectors that promotes faster local productivity growth. Okay, these professionals have the skills, have the talents, have the capability to contribute to sectors that are lagging behind. We just have to give them the chance. We just have to liberalize it so that they are able to contribute freely. Okay. Second recommendation, okay, we recommend, okay, to intensify the conduct of research and development, particularly at the higher education institution. I understand the many constraints surrounding why research is challenging to do, but it is the way to go. Okay, we need to build knowledge capital. And using the metric that I have shown you earlier, we need to accumulate research and development. Why? To stimulate technological development, generate patents, introduce innovations, drive economies of scale, and create new approaches, new methodologies that upgrade the practice of professions. Okay? It is the only way by which we can enhance the field, because faculties are not just teaching from the textbook. They're also teaching from state-of-the-art research, modern ways of doing things, new ways of doing things that are backed by research, that are supported by scientific evidence and not just anecdotal or ad hoc evidences. Third recommendation is to institutionalize the developmental aspect, no? The developmental positioning of CPD. So rather than mandating professionals to attend inconsequential seminars and unnecessary training for compliance, some training are very expensive, we might consider shifting CPD programs towards lifelong education that will truly enhance the conduct of professional instruction and practice. As what I have told you earlier, seminars wherein you will just sit down, listen, okay, may not be sufficient. It's the pedagogy there is just one way, okay? We need to also enhance the availability of quality training programs that will truly enhance the productivity, the skills, the knowledge of the participants, of professionals who are required to take CPD programs. Next is to look into MRAs and domestic regulations as a motivating factor rather than seeing MRAs as a constraint. The requirement, the qualification is too steep. I cannot achieve that. Okay. Rather than looking at it from that perspective, MRAs and the domestic regulations can also be seen as a motivating factor for professionals to upgrade their human resource dimension that will make them comparable. It's a challenge. We take it as a challenge rather than as a constraint. Because at the end of the day, it is the individual, the professional, and the economy who would benefit from reaching to that high standards. Okay? Likewise, the MRAs and domestic regulations would also compel higher education institutions to benchmark with partner economies in terms of curriculum design, teaching pedagogies, learning outcomes, so that education standards are also comparable. Okay? And while we are raising the standards of education, it must not be seen as an additional burden or cost, but it can also be seen as a form of investment that will allow us to upgrade what we currently have, and not necessarily for the reasons of migrating. Okay? But it's a case-to-case basis. But at the end of the day, it is still the augmentation of simple skills into something that is more comparable with our neighboring economies. We take it as a challenge. We take it as a motivating factor for us to move, to strategize, to intervene so that human resources are comparable. Okay? Comparable with whom? Comparable with other economies imposing these high standards. And on that note, okay, thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions for our discussion. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Rivera, for that very insightful presentation. We'll talk more about your insights later on during the open forum. Let me remind again our participants to present your questions in our Q&A box if you are with Zoom, and if you are with Facebook Live, use the comment section. The presentation material as well as the published paper will be given to you via the link provided in those sections. So now we move on to our second presenter. The second study is titled Inclusivity of Factor Flows in a Labor Surplus Economy Experiences of the Philippines. This is also authored by Dr. Rivera and Dr. Tullao Jr. It examines the impact of labor emigration on wages, employment, and production in the Philippines, capital-intensive and labor-intensive sectors, respectively represented by manufacturing and agriculture. The authors investigated whether deployment remittances and foreign direct investments are inclusive given the consequential employment opportunities specifically for unskilled workers. They looked at data from 1991 to 2021, revealing the need for the recalibration strategies to achieve inclusive growth. We are very honored and glad to have with us today Dr. Tullao Jr. to discuss the findings and recommendations of the study. Let me introduce our speaker. Dr. Tereso S. Tullao Jr. is a University Fellow and Professor Emeritus of Economics at De La Salle University, Manila. He held several positions at DLSU, including the Dean of the College of Business and Economics, Director of the Angelo King Institute for Economic and Business Studies, and Editor-in-Chief of the DLSU Business and Economics Review, among others. He was educated at DLSU, at Stanford University, and Tufts University. He has published several articles, monographs, and books in Filipino and English in the fields of economics of education, trade in services, movement of natural persons, and migration and remittances. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Tullao. The virtual floor is yours. Dr. Tullao?
Thank you very much, Sonny, Mr. Domingo, for that kind introduction. The title of our study is Inclusivity of Factor Flows in a Labor Surplus Economy, Experience of the Philippines. There are several reasons why we're studying this topic. Next slide, please. The movement of factor inputs. Next slide, okay. Next slide, please. The movement of factor inputs, labor and capital, has been a major feature of globalization. The effects of immigration of foreign workers on receiving developed economies have been extensively examined in the literature. However, studies on the effects of labor emigration on descending developing economies has been rather scanty. Since inclusivity is a key objective of economic planners, we want to know if these global factor flows are favoring the employment and income of our labor resources. Next slide, please. Theoretically, emigration of labor can contract the capacity of the sending economy to produce because of a substantial reduction in its labor inputs. However, if the country has extensive unemployed resources, immigration can address the underutilization of human resources in the sending country and can even improve the capacity to produce. Moreover, many of the migrant workers do send significant amount of remittances that have positive effects on households and the macro economy. In the long run, immigration can increase the wage rate, which can affect the use of factor inputs and commodity prices. Theoretically, the increase in the price of labor-intensive goods can enhance the production of labor-intensive goods at the expense of the capital-intensive goods. Next slide, please. Yes, next slide. I just covered that. Okay. Now, given this backdrop, we pose two hypotheses. One, labor emigration becomes inclusive since it provides employment opportunities for unemployed laborers left behind in the sending country. Two, foreign direct investments of FDI flows become inclusive in the long run since it can give opportunities for unemployed laborers left behind in the sending country. Next slide, please. Thus, the statement of the problem in this study is, does emigration and foreign direct investments have an impact on the production and employment of labor-intensive sectors relative to capital-intensive sectors in the Philippines? The general objective is to determine, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. Is to determine if migration and FDI flows have an impact on wages, employment, and production of the labor-intensive sector relative to the capital-intensive sector. The labor-intensive sector here is agriculture, and the capital-intensive sector is the manufacturing. Next slide, please. More specifically, our research objectives is to show the trends in migration flows, foreign direct investment flows, wages, employment and production in the labor and capital-intensive sectors in the Philippines. Second, to estimate an empirical model that will capture the impacts of labor emigration and FDIs in the production and employment in the labor and capital-intensive sectors in the Philippines. Excuse the barking of our dogs, okay? And third, to explicate conditions and provide policy recommendations on how labor emigration and foreign direct investments can effectively lead to inclusive growth. Next slide, please. So the scope and limitations were discussed earlier, okay, on the rationale why we are studying this. Well, I forgot to thank the Philippine Apex Study Center Network for providing financial assistance in the conduct of this research. And the reason why we conducted this is because of the trust of the APEC to be more inclusive. Next slide, please. Well, I just mentioned that, okay? Next slide, please. Well, in the review of literature, okay, we have examined the effects of labor migration on wages, employment, and production. The same thing with foreign direct investments on its impact on wages in the sending economy, employment in the sending economy, and production in the sending economy. So the literature shows conflicting results. There are positives and sometimes negative effects. Next slide, please. So the research gap based on this review of literature is, what is the impact of labor emigration and foreign direct investments on wages, employment, and production in the labor and capital-intensive sectors in the Philippines? So this is a new study, because the study in the previous literature is the effect of immigration on the macroeconomy and the effects of FDI on the macroeconomy. In this particular study, we want to know which industries, or in this particular, which sector, the capital intensive sector or the labor intensive sectors, benefit or incur a cost in the movement of people and the movement of capital from the point of view of the sending for labor and receiving country for foreign direct investments. Okay, next slide, please. So the conceptual framework is shown here: labor immigration from the Philippines and FDI inflows to the Philippines as impulse variables. Okay, so they, as impulse variables, they can affect wages, employment, production, both in the labor-intensive sector and the capital-intensive sector. The same is true for foreign direct investments. This is treated as an impulse variable affecting employment and production in the wages, employment, and production in the labor and capital-intensive subsectors in the Philippines. Next slide, please. So we have a model specification here. We are using a vector autoregression analysis, okay? And this, as mentioned here, resembles a structural equation, except that the endogenous variables are considered together. Its endogenous variable is explained by its lag values of all other endogenous variables in the model. Used in analyzing this VAR or vector autoregression analysis is used in analyzing the dynamic behavior of time series variables towards forecasting, structural inference, and policy analysis. So we have four equation or models, okay? First one is deployment and its impact on wages, employment in the manufacturing sector, and production in the manufacturing sector. And we do the same thing for deployment in agriculture, wages in agriculture, employment in agriculture, and production in agriculture. So the second is the impact of remittances on wages, employment, and production in the capital-intensive sector. And we did the same thing for the impact of remittances on wages, employment, and production. Then on foreign direct investments, then what is the impact of this on wages, employment, and production in the manufacturing sector, and foreign direct investment flows impact on wages in agriculture, employment in agriculture, and foreign and production. Now, the last equation is what determines foreign direct investment flows? Is it determined by the production in the manufacturing sector, or is it determined by the production in agricultural sector? Okay, can we go into the results? Next slide, please. Yeah. Well, these are the variables that we have used, okay? These are self-explanatory, okay? And so this is the methodological process. We review the literature, we've done that, and then we gather secondary data from national government agencies, given the limitation as mentioned, and then we estimate the vector autoregression. But before we do that, we have to test for stationarity test, meaning the mean variance of the variables do not vary over time. And then we also estimate the optimal log structure. And then we forecast, and there are two forecasts here: variance decomposition and the orthogonal impulse response function. We will not discuss this. We will just discuss the results of the VAR. Okay. I just mentioned stationary. Okay. Okay. And we have tested that the equation demonstrated co-integration. That means over time, okay, the variables that we are using vary together. Okay, so that is co-integration. Okay, correlated. Okay. Next, can we go to the empirical results? Okay, the results. Next slide, please. Okay, now you have to bear with me. In the capital-intensive sector, deployment has a positive and significant effect on wages. This is consistent with theory and the literature. Decline in the supply of labor through emigration can create an excess demand for labor and will have a pressure to increase wage rate. That's why it's positive. Second, deployment or emigration has a positive and significant effect on employment. Again, this is consistent with theory and the literature. This is possible if the workers transfer from agriculture to manufacturing, from a low income or low wage sector to high wage sector. It is also possible that higher wage rate encourages workers to render labor services. Another reason is that unemployment is addressed through immigration. However, we've seen deployment has no significant effect on production. On the other hand, okay, this is the value of VAR analysis. So we analyzed the impact of wages. We said deployment and wages. Now let's see the effect of wages on other endogenous variables. Wages has significant impact on employment, but it is ambiguous. We are referring to the capital-intensive sectors. 5, employment has no significant effect on production. Although deployment has a positive impact on employment, it does not lead to significant increase in production. And we hypothesize possible reasons for this. This may result because there is a lack of capital in the capital in intensive sector or manufacturing to accommodate the increase in the transfer of labor from the low productivity sector. Next slide, please. Remittances. Let's see the effect of remittances. Remittances have a significant negative effect on wages and employment, but an insignificant negative effect on production. The reason behind these results is the possible impact of remittances on the reservation wage, which lowers the supply of labor of low-skilled workers and matched by an even lower demand for skilled workers due to reduced production, although insignificant, that leads to lower wages. Reservation wage, we've seen that reservation wage has increased, meaning because they have received remittances, the workers there, okay, tend to have, they tend not to work. 7, through remittances, wage has a significant effect on employment, albeit ambiguous. 8, working through remittances, employment has a positive and significant effect on production. Foreign direct investment, next slide, please, has a positive effect on wages, employment, and production. These results are consistent with theory and literature. As more capital is used in the sector, the productivity of labor increases and in turn increases the demand for labor, which can lead to a higher wage rate. In addition, working through FDI, wage has a positive and significant effect on production. So we did the same thing. Next slide, please. Okay, I was informed by the moderator. Next slide, please. We did the same thing to the labor-intensive sector and the agriculture. What is important in this is that through deployment, wage has a significant negative effect on employment. Another is through deployment, employment has a significant negative on production. These are important. Emigration of workers adversely affect the agricultural sector. Next is working through remittances. Can we go to remittances? Next slide. Employment has a negative and significant effect on production. Remittances is also bad for the agricultural sector. And I think that's it. Let's go to the conclusions, okay? We're running out of time. Okay, there are 2 major conclusions. Oh no, 4. Labor emigration is not beneficial for the agricultural sector because it reduces employment and production. Second, although labor emigration increases the employment in the capital-intensive sector that is manufacturing, it does not increase production because of limited capital inputs. Next slide, please. Remittances are also not beneficial for agriculture. We have seen an apparent increase in the reservation wage with remittances. This decreases the supply of labor and the production in agriculture. As a result, decreases the demand for labor and the wage rate. Next slide, please. Foreign direct investment flows are beneficial to the capital-intensive sector, which is self-explanatory because they need more capital, but not necessarily to the labor-intensive sector. So what are the policy recommendations? Next slide, please. 1, complement labor immigration with more FDI flows. This is to generate production production in the capital-intensive sector, because the transferring workers from agriculture to manufacturing cannot contribute to production because of limited capital to accompany them. Second, enhance assistance provided to the agricultural sector. I mean, there are assistance being given to agriculture, and we want to enhance them to improve the productivity of the workers so that when there is an emigration of workers, those displaced workers in agriculture can be accommodated in manufacturing because of their higher skills. Well, the third is invest in people by prioritizing education and upskilling skills. So these two are related. And third is to redirect utilization of remittances from consumption to savings and investment. This is probably the reason why we don't see the effect of remittances on production, and we see them. The result of our study show that remittances has a negative effect on production. The reason is because our production or our remittances are used for consumption activities instead for savings that can be translated to investment. I mean, 25 to 30 billion US dollar a year, if they are channeled to savings, can generate more employment, not more employment, more capital that can absorb the surplus labor of this economy. With that, thank you very much and maraming salamat sa inyong pakikinig. Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tullao. It's actually quite surprising that remittances actually lead to lower wages, employment, and production in agriculture. So we'll talk more about that during the open forum. Again, let me remind our participants to be active in terms of posting your questions in our Q&A box via Zoom and our comment section via Facebook Live. So moving on, let's enrich our conversations by inviting very esteemed discussants. Our first discussant is Commissioner Aldrin Darilag. Let me introduce Dr. Darilag. Commissioner Aldrin Arenas Darilag has significantly advanced higher education through his roles as Oversight Commissioner for various disciplines and as a champion for futures thinking and cultural education. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he spearheaded flexible learning initiatives and consortia in multiple regions. Before his appointment as CHED Commissioner, he held leadership positions at DLSU Philippines, St. Paul University, Pamantasan and Lungsod ng Marikina, and taught at several other universities. He holds a PhD in Educational Leadership and Management, has earned PhD units in Science Education, major in Biology, and finished his Master of Education major in School Leadership from De La Salle University, Manila. He also has a master's degree in Medical Technology at the University of Santo Tomas, and he is a certified human resource professional, a registered medical technologist, and a registered nurse. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have Commissioner Aldrin Darilag. Dr. Darilag, the floor is yours.
Thank you, key officials and members of the Philippine Institute of Development Studies, participants, valued guests, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant day to all of you. My commendations to the Philippine Institute of Development Studies for successfully holding this webinar on the discussion of labor inclusivity and skilled labor mobility in the Philippines and the ASEAN region. This academic convergence is a testament to our commitment in uplifting and upskilling the Filipino workforce in the ASEAN region and beyond. In the same vein, I extend my commendations to the authors of the second study entitled Assessing the Readiness of the Filipino MRA-supported professions to participate in the mobility of skilled labor in the ASEAN region, lessons for APEC economies, for they have explicitly posited crucial points towards the reassessment and enhancement of quality professional services in the country. Such studies like these bear significance on how we can further improve, strengthen, and reframe policies, frameworks, and programs towards revitalization of projects and mechanisms in preparing our learners and professionals to be at par with the demands of the local, national, and regional labor market. I would also like to encourage the participants of today's webinar in producing studies and innovations such as this toward the performance assessment of our Filipino workforce. In that way, we can capacitate our learners and professionals for the improvement of professional quality services that can boost labor mobility and increase employment opportunities for the Filipino community. We acknowledge the fact that policy frameworks, governance structures, and institutional mechanisms in the country are still a work in progress. Hence, there are still areas of improvement, enhancement, and recalibration on how we can better prepare our professionals to be equipped with necessary skills, competencies, and qualifications towards mobility of skilled labor in the ASEAN region. As such, I concur with the findings of the study that as a member of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC, government-industry academic linkages are prompted to identify key factors in harmonizing processes and systems that can address competency gaps among our labored workers and professionals. I have observed that various professions have significant results that need further development and improvement of the human capital workforce. Indeed, it is high time that regulators and professional organizations must come together to further actualize developmental mechanisms and apply internationally benchmark practices that will make Filipinos even more comparable with most of the requirements of the Mutual Recognition Arrangements or MRAs. With this, focus group discussions or panel discussions with technical working groups and professional experts are encouraged and should serve as a proactive response to further address employability and mobility issues in the country. There is still a need for first, review and modify existing rules, curriculum, pedagogies, and learning standards. Second, the reassessment of training needs of professionals. And third, continuous monitoring and enhancement of education training, professional certifications and licensing, accreditations, research and publications, and other professional regulatory mechanisms among professionals as part of the ways and means of all concerned agencies and organizations. Further, I would like to recommend having discussions on how we can inculcate lifelong learning frameworks as part of the human resource development of our workers. A seamless lifelong learning framework is to be adopted in the educational framework of the country. One great example is the Lifelong Learning Educator Qualification System of the National Institute for Lifelong Education of Korea, which is a concept added to the qualifications framework in accordance with the Lifelong Education Act of Korea, supporting the career growth of educators and as a supplement to their qualifications and credentials that will help them improve their capabilities in attaining quality education. With these new and highly recommended perspectives, the government recognizes this matter and adopts the NILE frameworks of South Korea as a form of a trajectory of the Philippine higher education to Philippine qualifications framework. Currently, we have a pending legislation introduced by Senator Joel Villanueva, the Senate Bill 2387, or the Lifelong Learning Development Framework Bill. This seeks to ensure equitable, inclusive, and accessible lifelong learning opportunities. It also aims to empower local government units to take the lead in the implementation of this initiative by establishing community learning centers. Moreover, as this study is focused on the 5 priority areas, namely accountancy service, medical practitioners, architectural services, engineering services, and tourism professionals, it is befitting to consider putting interest on upskilling the competencies of teacher education, special education facilitators, child care education specialists, and guidance counselors, as these are globally high priority and in-demand professions alongside engineers, architects, and health workers. It is important to invest in this sector to discuss the plans, programs, and activities towards the improvement of teacher education within the Southeast Asian region. As the higher education sector faces a rapidly evolving landscape, it is imperative for teachers, educators, and school leaders to be able to respond to emerging concerns, overcome challenges, and adapt to internationally benchmarked practices. As a partner institution of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, our responsibilities are critical as we align our strategic directions and initiatives with the goals of ASEAN in both education and teacher education. It is with fervent hope that these comments and suggestions will be taken into consideration as we all work hand in hand towards the realization and contribution to the continued professional development and workforce progress of our professionals. By taking significant steps in providing innovative and cost-effective solutions to improve the qualifications framework of our professionals, we are future-proofing it for the 21st century and beyond. Attuning to the goal of uplifting and upskilling the qualifications of our labor workers, the Commission on Higher Education remains steadfast in its commitment to the advancement of equitable and quality tertiary education in the country and recognizes the importance of improving the qualifications framework of the country. In the fulfillment of our vision and mandate, CHED proactively responds to the needs and demands of the ASEAN region market and beyond. There are certain initiatives that the Commission has been working on. In terms of the allied health sciences and medicine, there have been substantial changes in nursing and medicine programs. To ensure quality pre-service education and to deter its commercialization, several policy standards and guidelines were passed by the Commission on Higher Education to strictly enforce guidelines on health professional education, with some specifically designed for programs for doctors, nurses, and barangay health workers. One of the steps undertaken by the Commission is to meet the objectives of Universal Healthcare Law or the Republic Act 11223, that is to conduct a series of reorientation of health professions education curricula to primary health care. The reorientation of the health profession education curriculum towards primary health care is pivotal in the development of the Philippine health workforce. This aims to ensure that all health professionals are primary care ready upon graduation and passing the licensure examinations, making them equipped to deliver primary care services. As part of the series of updating our curriculum at the tertiary level towards outcomes-based education, the policy standards and guidelines of the Bachelor of Science in Nursing program has been revised pursuant to CHED Memorandum Order No. 15, Series of 2017. In the year 2021, the Philippines was featured as the top exporter of nurses, ironically also faces a shortage in its own home, according to the CNA News Insider. Canadian authorities have relaxed nursing requirements to attract more Filipino nurses and students, which led to their request for assistance to the recruitment of Filipino nurses. Since then, Canadian ministries and HEIs want to work with CHED and other higher education institutions to align curricula to enhance recognition of degrees and create pathways for Filipino nurses to practice their profession in Canada, resulting in many Philippine HEIs transpiring agreements with Canadian HEIs on nursing programs. In terms of tourism and hospitality management, there has been a conduct of focus group discussions with stakeholders in the industry for the development of the credit transfer system for tourism and hospitality management. Additionally, the finalization of the policy standards and guidelines for hospitality management and tourism management programs based on CHED Memorandum Order Number 15 Series of 2019 and the consultation with stakeholders for the development of the details of the requirements for HMTM education programs are underway. In terms of education and curriculum development, one major initiative is the change in the education system embedded in the PQF, where the former Philippine Education and Training System is in ladderized program. At present, it is now interspersed concept, different from typical ladderized format, where an undergraduate student who is currently enrolled in his respective institution can enroll in the national certificate courses of TESDA during the same time they are taking their bachelor's degree, instead of acquiring NC courses after they have completed their K-12 curriculum and or their undergraduate degree. The reforms made in the ladderized education systems are responses of the education sector to the needs and the requirements of professionals or workers, as it aims to consider the unique Filipino socio-cultural landscape and context. Furthermore, the Commission's policy standards and guidelines for the various programs have been revised to be tailored to the learning outcomes-based education paradigm that underlies the PQF. With this, the Department of Budget and Management approved CHED proposal on the institutionalization of the Philippine Qualifications Framework in higher education with a budget allocation of 50 million. This includes issuance of the Philippine Credit Transfer System, preparation of communications plans, conduct of capacity building training orientation, inclusion of PQF and AQRF seal on qualifications, diplomas, and the framework for lifelong learning, among others. The Commission on Higher Education underscores the important role of professionals in nation building and upholds the continuous improvement of our human capital. Through joint CHED TESDA Memorandum Circular Number 1, trainees and graduates of technical vocational courses will find it easier to finish a bachelor's degree. This adheres to the implementation of the Philippine Credit Transfer System, which facilitates movements of learners in finishing a vocational course to a college degree program. It is a form of reinforcement in skills mastery and lifelong learning of students, as it responds to the call of President Ferdinand Marcos towards prioritizing and the upskilling and reskilling of the Philippine workforce and for employability increase. Currently, the Commission conducts planning workshops and nationwide orientations on the implementation of the Philippine Credit Transfer System to higher education institutions with the goal to encourage lifelong learning of individuals and provide employees with specific training standards and qualifications aligned with industry standards. It is of utmost goal of equipping Filipino professionals with the necessary education, training, and skills. The Commission is working towards the revitalization of our institutional cultures with the demands of the 21st century era of our standard on qualifications and programs and courses in higher education. The following are the current ways forward for the Commission. First is the issuance of joint CHED and TESDA memorandum circular on the PCTS on agricultural and biosystems engineering, hotel management and tourism management, and dentistry programs. Second is the matching of learning competencies, development of PCTS guidelines, and issuance of joint CHED and TESDA memorandum circular on PCTS for the following priority disciplines: early childhood education, nutrition and dietetics, industrial technology, game development and animation, and nursing. Third is on the conduct of capacity building on PCTS implementation for implementers such as the registrars, deans, vice presidents for academic affairs, and lastly, the ongoing development of lifelong learning framework and guidelines for micro-credentials. As your commissioner in the Commission on Higher Education, I hereby reiterate the Commission's unwavering commitment to pursue programs, activities, and projects that are consistent with international standards, addressing employment mismatch, and supporting job mobility for our learners and professionals. The Commission is one with its partners, partner organizations, stakeholders, and higher education institutions in the enhancement of Philippine Qualifications Framework as it promotes mobility, ensures quality, provides access, and elevates the lifelong learning experience for all Filipinos. Thank you very much at mabuhay ang PIDS.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Darilag. We'll give you more time to expound on your manifestations later on during the open forum. So now, let me call on our next esteemed discussant, Dr. Michael Angelo Cortez. Let me introduce him. Dr. Michael Angelo Cortez is a professor of accountancy at the School of Management of Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University in Japan. His research interests include ESG and sustainability, corporate capital structures, and financial performance. Prior to moving to Japan, he has worked with Dr. Tereso Tullao on globalization, bilateral trade, temporary labor migration, and remittances. Dr. Cortez, the virtual floor is yours.
Morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So good morning, everyone, and thanks very much for the introduction. And this PIDS webinar is such a deja vu for me because it has been since when? I think the last time I worked with PIDS and Philippine Apex Study Center was way back in 2013, where Dr. Tullao and I worked on JPEPA, Japan-Philippines Economic Partnership Agreement, and also other bilaterals with the US. And that's why this is quite a nice homecoming for me, together with my good friend, Paolo Rivera, and my other friend, Dr. Cynthia Cudya from De La Salle University. So meanwhile, I love this presentation by Dr. Tullao, which I would try to summarize with my working title, Does Emigration Bring Inclusivity in the Philippines? When I used to work with Dr. Tullao, I was the only one who's a non-economist. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm the only one who's not the economist in the team. And that's why here's our little family photo, where we used to work on projects on temporary labor migration versus permanent labor migration until terms evolved according to the General Agreement on Trade and Services, where we used the technical term of movement of natural persons, basically, in a nutshell, professionals. And now we are talking about emigration. And emigration is seen from the perspective of a labor-sending economy like the Philippines. And of course, our discussions will center on the role of remittances in stabilizing the Philippine economy, if not the main driver of the Philippine economy. So let's go to the next slide. So I've noted and jotted down the independent variables, but actually it's a VAR, meaning it's a vector auto-regression, where we have deployment, remittances, and foreign direct investments, where the seeming dependent variables are the wages, employment, and production in the capital and labor-intensive sectors. I've also noted down the signs of the relationships, the directions of the relationships, and anyway, it's a vector autoregression. That means, let's go to the next slide. My colleague, Paolo Rivera, did an excellent job in the econometrics and the mathematics of this. And that's why I will focus on another aspect of research methods. So these are the key findings. Number one, deployment and remittances and FDI flows are not inclusive because it worsens the situation in the agricultural sector. Meanwhile, this research is an empirical model. And we have around 160 participants in this webinar, where I just have to share the point that these are constructs. Okay, the constructs and operationalized into measurable variables, and that's why these the value of this research is basically on testing, okay, and validating or falsifying this kind of empirical models. So how does it apply to your field? How does it apply to your sector or your industry or your job? So later I'll give you anecdotal and examples of I would wish some young researchers, like many of our viewers, would pick up, such as this topic. This is an emerging topic. Does remittances promote inclusivity in the agricultural sector? Number two, while deployment and FDI flows increase employment in the manufacturing sector, production does not increase due to limited capital inputs. Again, I mentioned that I'm not the economist in the group. I am the accountant. I am the I'm the financial analyst, and likewise, I've also represented the team in many multilateral presentations with the United Nations Development Program and WTO. And that's why I'm more of the qualitative in our analysis here. So, but later I'll also have my critiques on this second finding. And finally, we have capital-intensive sector benefits more from FDI flows than labor-intensive sectors. All right, let's go to the next slide. So, I would like to characterize the emigrants. I myself, I'm a migrant. So I would generalize that immigration or migration is inclusive. And just a case in point, when I left our team, that's also how I met Dr. Paolo Rivera, who I turned over the files of our research with Dr. Tullao. And interestingly, when I saw the first presentation earlier on MRAs, it still has a lot of remnants of our old research with Dr. Tullao almost 2 decades ago. So meanwhile, speaking of those kind of research, I would like to emphasize the kind of skill sets. And we need to categorize the skill sets of immigrants to link with manufacturing, labor and capital intensive sectors. And that is why I think we should take the first presentation and the second presentation all together to contextualize the kind of labor immigrants that we are sending and how it will affect, or how does it open up slots or opportunities and promote inclusivity to those who are left behind. And particularly, I think my colleague Paolo did a good job in categorizing this education and experience. And moreover, we will also look into the examination and the certification requirements of the immigrants. And in social studies, in earlier social studies on migration, we also consider patterns of migration where there are earlier success by families. There is asymmetric information. There is community knowledge, which is not available to everyone or everyone in the Philippines or in a particular region. So my point is, earlier successes of family members promote the migration of the next family member. And, the community, we build little Italies, we build, a replica of the destination countries. And that's why there is proprietary information, exclusive information to the community of immigrants. And that's why my point is, in a social strata, there is a group of those who can migrate and those who cannot migrate. So in related studies published by Dr. Tullao, we mentioned about the Gini coefficient. There is a social demographic who are able to migrate and those who are not able to migrate. So just refer to our previous studies on that. And next slide, please. All right, so these are my case studies, and there's a lot of family pictures here with me, the professor, my cousin up there who's a financial professional in Sydney, Australia. Up there in the right is the caregiver, niece of mine, who works as a caregiver in Israel. And down below is the couple, also my cousins, who are teachers in America. And which emphasizes the point that there are different skill sets of immigrants remitting to the Philippines. So what do we have in common aside from we are all related? Well, surprisingly, I could say that in relation to the presentation of Dr. Tullao, there is an indirect effect on agriculture. Surprise. So that is actually a case study subject to further testing. When we have a phenomena, we look into this in the form of case studies. So looking to tell more about it is that I have noted a pattern, particularly in our local community, where OFWs or migrant workers or migrant Filipinos or global Filipinos have this vision of going back to the Philippines, and through entrepreneurial activities, they invest in farming, and through that they hire, they buy farms, they invest in agricultural activities, hence promoting inclusivity. But I think the model does not capture that empirically, because I think it's looking into the direct effect. Okay, so meanwhile, like I said, this is an empirical model, and we look into the ability to falsify and validate this kind of findings. Next slide. I think that is my last slide. Is it? Yes. And speaking of, and since I mentioned that I'm not the economist in the group, I am the writer. So I would just like to suggest to further improve this discussion paper or this working paper into hitting some sustainable development goals to make it more universal appealing, making it more global, where we hit issues on no poverty, zero hunger, and quality education, which I think is the real solution, or one of the policy options that I totally agree. And earlier when you did that survey, when education ranked second, I was really hoping that education would rank first, because education will really enable and education experience and other forms of certification would enable emigration. So likewise, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, reduced inequality, sustainable cities and communities. These are, I think, most of the SDG goals of the United Nations that are very much relevant to the findings of Dr. Tullao and Dr. Rivera. And next slide, please. And thanks for the reminder, Reniel. So moving on, I would just like to go back to, can we end the slides? I think that was my last slide, Reniel. So moving on, there you go. So basically, I would just like to, as I was reading the paper by Dr. Tullao and Dr. Rivera, I was, at the back of my mind, I was thinking, what happened to services? I've been inching to find out what happens to services, but I think that I will leave it up to my colleague John Paolo Rivera to explain, because there is a seeming disconnect between those who can migrate and those who are left behind in agriculture, and that's why we see the negative effect. But I believe they can elaborate more on that later. Likewise, labor intensive could probably, if you were to make a Venn diagram between labor intensive, then it probably cuts across manufacturing and the services sector. I think there are also new modalities of promoting inclusivity for the agricultural sector, but still education and other forms of experience and certification would be needed in order to promote emigration, to free up a slot in the agricultural sector, and to promote inclusivity. I think I answered one of your Q&A a while ago by Carlo John Arceo in the Q&A section, where I gave the example of special skilled workers. But of course, it's a little ambiguous originally in the system of Japan, where they allowed interns and technical trainees before they could qualify for SSW, also known as special skilled workers, which now accepts in this newly opened sector of Japanese economy. So, and that's why going back into the presentation and the findings of Dr. Tullao and Paolo Rivera, it is an empirical model, and I would like to emphasize it to everyone and the young scholars who are watching us right now. But really, it's up to you to test it further. Okay, test it, prove it, disprove, falsify it, but use the model so that you can test this and measure this in many other different variables using the construct already developed by Dr. Tullao. With that, I think I have said my piece. Thank you very much again, PIDS and PASI, and for the invite, and I hope to collaborate with you in future projects.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cortez. It's good to hear that you've collaborated with PIDS a decade ago. So again, welcome to this PIDS platform. I think we've heard a lot from both our presenters and discussants. I just realized that we are dominated by De La Salle University graduates this morning. So congratulations to De La Salle for very good products from their curriculum and programs. So before we open the floor for questions coming from our participants, let me ask our authors to respond to the comments of our discussants. Also joining us in this section of the webinar is the other author of one of our studies, Dr. Cynthia Cudia. So before I ask the other authors, may I request Dr. Cudia to please respond to the insights coming from our discussants. Dr. Cudia, please. And again, welcome this morning.
Thank you, Reniel, and thank you, everyone. Oh, yes. I do, of course, agree with what the discussants mentioned. No? And I'd like just to emphasize that in our paper, the HRD, or the Human Resource Development, is essential because it's the enhancement of the abilities of an individual in forming human capital. And also, it is very vital because its purpose is to maintain the ASEAN dynamism in the midst of an expanding and differentiating labor force. So we welcome everyone for any questions or clarifications for this paper. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Cudia. May I request Dr. Tullao, please, for your initial comments on the insights coming from our discussants.
Well, for the first discussant, Commissioner Darilag, mentions about the qualifications framework, okay? And this is different from the mutual recognition arrangements. Mutual recognition arrangements are basically for regulated professions. including engineers, medical doctors, nurses, accountants. But qualifications framework are pertaining to various occupations in the labor force. And I think we need that because qualifications framework does not require a licensure examination, but it is school-based and the graduate is able to attain points, okay, so that he will be not certified but qualified to that level. And the aim in the ASEAN is to produce or to establish the ASEAN qualifications framework so that if that will evolve, then there will be a free movement, okay? A freer movement of labor resources because, you know, your level is the same as our level. So, well, but that is different from the mutual recognition arrangement because this is there's a legal basis for the practice of any profession. On the comment of Dr. Cortez, okay, so it says well, he mentioned about, you know, case analysis. Oh, it's well taken, okay? We are not ignoring the fact that immigration do have a positive effect on the economy and remittances do have a positive effect on the economy. But that's not the point of our, okay? The point of our study is if it is positive or is it negative? Is it positive for the agricultural sector and the capital-intensive sectors? So the VAR, the vector autoregression model, is meant to make a story out of the data. To make a story. And the results of our study confirms the theoretical model that we have studied in international economics. I'll stop there because I'm a very talkative person. I might end at 2 o'clock. Thank you, Sonny.
Thank you, Dr. Tullao. Well, we'll give you more time later on during our open forum. So now, let me ask our discussants to also turn on their camera, and we'll start with our Q&A. Again, for our online participants coming from Zoom and Facebook Live, you may post your questions via the chat box of Zoom and the comments section of Facebook. Include your name and institutional affiliation for us to recognize you. May I request our discussants to please open your cameras. Commissioner Darilag, are you there? Dr. Rivera will be joining us later if he's able to. Okay. So I think we are in consensus with regard to the amount of knowledge and insights shared by our presenters and discussants this morning. And I guess this open forum will be quite rich in terms of inputs coming from our participants and the answers coming from both our resource speakers as well as our discussants. So first question, I think this one is, well, supposedly addressed to Dr. Rivera being the first presenter, but given that Dr. Tullao and Dr. Cudia are co-authors, you can also answer that. Okay, so it was one of the conclusions of that study that Filipinos are ready to participate, no? In terms of looking at the regional labor market. The bigger question there is how competitive will they be? You know? given that participation in the regional market. It was mentioned that, well, right now, evidence-wise, 44% of our OFWs are engaged in elementary occupations. And in terms of knowledge capital, we are quite lagging. We are very far behind our supposed competitors. May that be Thailand or Vietnam. So we need more coming from our students and graduates from our higher education to produce knowledge materials through publications and through innovative materials. So, Dr. Tullao, can you answer this? How competitive are we right now, given everything? You say that we are ready, but are we competitive given the regional
landscape? Of course, we are competitive. We are competitive in the professions that we studied. We are competitive in nursing. We are competitive in engineering. We are competitive in accountancy. Okay. So, but of course, the study does not cover unskilled workers. Okay. There are 2 million Filipinos that are overseas workers. Well, probably there we are not competitive. But that is not the focus of our study. The focus of our study are on the regulated professions. Yes, without any doubt, we are competitive based on the qualifications, the education, and the experience. Go to Singapore, okay, and many of their IT professionals are graduate from not De La Salle. Of course, some are from De La Salle, but graduates from the Philippines. Accounting, it's the same thing. Okay. I hope that answers it, okay, because no one is asking about it.
Thank you, Dr. Tullao. I guess it's not really a question that we are producing very good graduates from our universities. The other side there is how many are we producing that are at that level, and how many are supposedly not at par with global standards. That's a big question for our educational system, and I think Commissioner Darilag can provide some inputs here. We've had this seemingly unsolvable riddle, both in terms of our basic education as well as in some cases higher education. So, Commissioner Darilag, can you provide some insights there?
Yeah, I think there's still a need for DepEd and CHED to properly collaborate with one another in terms of how can we seamlessly progress from basic education to higher education, and also the equation of having TESDA in the loop. I think this is really a work in progress still, no? We are still taking note of the effect of the K-12 program vis-a-vis the objectives and the expected outcome that we are having in the higher education system. Currently, we are engaging in TESDA because we want really to embed TESDA in the higher education program. So as I have told you a while ago, it's no longer ladderized, but we are embedding properly the national competency program of TESDA within the program of higher education system. But this is this is the initiatives that we are taking now to have a seamless transition from basic education up to the higher education system. I just want also to take note that there is also a need for us to establish centers of training or training centers. Just like in engineering, we have some state universities and colleges in the country that are said to be national training center for engineering, and they are the ASEAN qualified training centers. So I think there is still a scarcity of training centers that are being recognized by different ASEAN countries and ASEAN partners. So these are the things that that we need to put in place, no? If we really want to realize our objective of these MRAs.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Darilag. So I guess it's all about alignment and complementation in terms of what? Basic education, higher education, and even TESTA. So you mentioned that supposed seamless ladderized complementation between those institutions. And I think if we are effective in actually having that result, that would also result to better graduates.
Mr. Domingo, I have a question to Commissioner Darila.
Yes, please, Dr. Tullao. Go ahead.
What is the position of CHED in opening higher education institution to 100% private ownership? That is being discussed in Congress, Commissioner Darila.
Yeah, our position now is we are presently collaborating with our lawmakers because there are some legal concerns in terms of in terms of that initiative, Dr. Tullao. I think in line with other initiatives of the Congress, just like putting transnational higher education as one of the important framework in this very important initiative. We need to still collaborate with our lawmakers before we take before we present our own position as the commission. But for the information of everybody, there is still an ongoing negotiation with our lawmakers and private practitioners or private higher education institutions in terms of that initiative.
Thank you very much.
But as of now, Dr. Tullao, I cannot state yet our position because we are still coordinating and collaborating with the lawmakers.
I don't want to sound like Boy Abunda, so that means it's a no. No, sorry.
There's no answer yet at the moment. So I think
There's no answer yet as of this
that's
moment.
the core message.
I cannot give you an honest to goodness answer. But I would like to believe that there should be equality as well as equity across different partners in higher education system.
Okay, so it's all about us bettering standards within our educational systems, whether it be coming from the private sector, the public sector, or even from foreign counterparts. Okay, so I think we can go to questions about the second presentation. Well, I think it was interesting to note that the impact in terms of labor immigration to the labor-intensive sectors, particularly in this case agriculture, really was more of negative. And if you look at remittances, it was impacting all our dependent variables in, well, a not so good way, in terms of wages, in terms of employment, in terms of productivity. So in someone or people may say that this is not really intuitive because remittances provide so much, in terms of the national economy, in terms of the capacity of our Filipino households. So can you provide more insights as regard this result of the study?
Thank you very much for giving me 1 hour to explain the impact of
You
remittances.
have
Okay.
5 minutes
No, 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 no,
to
no, 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 no,
explain
no,
the
no, no.
core
Okay.
message of your
Okay.
response.
I want 1 hour, okay, to explain this. Now, the reason, of course, I'm joking, okay? The point is, remittances do have a positive impact on our economy, okay, the macroeconomy. However, okay, from sectoral approach, okay, it adversely affects the agricultural sector because these are low skill. Let me give you a very simple example. Many of these workers are unemployed or low skilled. Okay, probably receiving what, 500 pesos a day? Why should I work when my parents send me 1,000 pesos a day? That is the meaning of reservation wage. Okay? It increases. So why should I work with 500 when I receive 1,000 a day? So because of that, a reduction in the supply of labor, then the production in agriculture will also go down because people are not working. Simple as that.
So it's all
5
about
minutes, huh?
possibly value reorientation, right? Households receiving so much in terms of remittances and them being really not pressured to work or do better in terms of their personal and professional lives.
In economics, you don't love your country, you love yourself. Okay? So in
Okay.
this particular
In probably
case, yeah,
in a
okay.
very wrong way. Loving yourself in a very wrong way. Because what you're
Oh.
doing essentially is not sustainable in terms of your eventual well-being.
No, well, my point is that is the decision of the individual.
I
We
think you also
cannot question the decision of the
of the
individual.
individuals. I think one of your recommendations was for them to actually transition from consuming to actually saving, given those remittances. And I think that's a core message that we have to deliver to our constituents here. Dr. Cortez probably has a lot more to say because he has experiences, and probably that grounding is very much needed in this discourse. Dr. Cortez, can you provide us with a few of your practical insights?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, Dr. Tullao emphasized his third policy option, which is really about investing and saving. And I totally agree with you, Sunny, that it's not sustainable. And there is a brewing economic crisis now in the world. Currencies are devaluing, and the U.S. economy is on a Ponzi scheme of issuing many bonds over bonds over bonds, and people are now talking in the global arena about another Great Depression. And that is why in that context, it's a constant reminder for everyone to upskill. And going back to the points, my point basically is on the skill set. Who are those who are able to migrate? And that is why Dr. Tullao is totally correct in saying that you should invest in education, you should upskill, you should you get educated and find opportunities as well abroad. Now, to give you an example, Sunny, about I answered the question on SSW, Special Skilled Worker System in Japan, and also Commissioner Darilag's point on coordination with TESDA. It initially started as what they call it, internship system, and before it became an SSW, special skilled. But to a certain degree, it's also skilled, but there's also a higher education requirement already. That you are well versed with languages, you attain a certain level of education, you are certified by a TESDA counterpart sending agency before you are received here in Japan and qualify to work in aviation, in building maintenance, in welding, shipbuilding, and now most recently even farming and agriculture. fisheries. They open these sectors for special skilled workers. So how do we now match the skill? We call it unskilled, we call it semi-skilled, we call it. That has been the dilemma long ago in POEA, our categorization of the skill sets. And that is why I just want to say that, the point of the paper is really to upskill, to qualify for eventual migration. But then again, just a constant reminder to everyone of the sustainability impact, because this is not gonna last a long time and economies can get overturned. Yes,
Mr.
po.
Domingo, I
Thank
just
you,
want to comment on the comment of
You're breaking up.
the
Dr. Tullao,
recommendation of
you're
upskilling is not to prepare them for migration, but for them to transfer to the higher productive sector like manufacturing.
Yeah, that's
right now they cannot.
That was my
because it's probably
recommendation
easier
on
said than
eventual
done, right?
migration.
And well, it's well known that the manufacturing sector is more inclusive in terms of taking in unskilled workers compared to the other sectors. So I guess that's an entry point for intervention. Lifelong learning, upscaling, future proofing. I think those are the key words in terms of moving forward. I have a question for Dr. Kudia. So since you are also with the academe, aside from being a co-author of this very good publication and study, we've seen the Philippines lagging, well, extremely lagging in terms of knowledge capital production. Dr. Rivera earlier presented a table showing us coming up actually with very minimal publications, compared to our supposed neighbors in the region and outside the region, with Japan and China actually having millions of publications for certain thematic sectors. In your perspective as part of the academe, how can we better our performance? I know that this is a problem that's ingrained very deeply in our system, and probably it's quite difficult to address, but can you provide us with some enlightenment in terms of moving forward with this concern? Dr. Kudia, please.
Yeah, thank you, Sonny. Okay, so as we know, economies must invest in basically in education and training its workforce to produce competent manpower. Okay, so HEIs, as we've recommended in our paper, in our study, is to benchmark with partner economies in terms of curriculum design, teaching pedagogies, and learning outcomes, so that the education standards are also comparable. And as presented by Dr. Rivera earlier, research and publication plays a vital role in this for this purpose. So that's how we could the role of academe could contribute to this purpose of having more qualified manpower across the region as stipulated in the MRAs.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kudia. And I guess such knowledge materials or publications really stimulate the other indicators of progression, innovativeness, upgrade in terms also of our human resources, their capacity, as reflected in the outputs that they produce. We have very little time left. Let me get a question from one of our participants. This is coming from ASEC, Robert Ferrer from DFA. According to him, there is a hearing this afternoon at the House of Representatives Committee on Overseas Workers Affairs discussing the bill on protection of remittances for OFWs. ASEC Ferrer would like to hear your thoughts on what lawmakers should prioritize. Since Dr. Tullao already started answering this earlier, Dr. Tullao, can you continue with your answer, please?
No, protecting the trust of the government of the Philippines since Marcos' time, okay, is to protect our workers working abroad, okay? It's not to protect remittances, okay? Now, I want to veer, okay, your question to the question you posed to Dr. Kudia, okay? And relate that to my question to Commissioner Darila. This is the reason why I am against the entry of foreign schools in this country, because they will not contribute to our knowledge capital. I don't think Harvard, Yale, or Stanford will come here. Even the experience of Malaysia, okay? We were not able to invite these Ivy League schools.
Well, who knows?
That's
Who
why.
knows? We may
Who knows?
incentivize
Okay,
them
I
enough to
wrote
come
an
in.
article in this. They will not enter because our per capita income is very low. You know how much they charge?
So essentially,
Okay?
we cannot afford their services.
Precisely,
If ever.
at the expense of our students.
Yeah.
And the second reason is that we have a well-developed private education. Malaysia does not have. Malaysia ignored, okay, private education for the development of the University of Malaysia. Malaya. Okay? And that's
probably
why they
another-
were sending Malaysians abroad to study. Not here in the Philippines since 1901, okay? We have a very strong private university.
Okay. Well, capacity-wise, in terms of being able to pay, I think your students and graduates from De La Salle and Ateneo probably will be able to afford the services of those Ivy League universities. So that's another item for discussion in another forum, I guess. About the earlier answer that you made, no, in terms of us supposedly protecting remittances, probably it's framed incorrectly. I guess they want to protect the households as well as the OFWs, no, in terms of, well, making sure that their earnings amount to something or redound to something. You know? So an answer there probably is your answer earlier, which is transition to savings from consumption expenses. Okay. So I guess we have no more time for answering questions coming from our participants. But before we actually close, may I request our discussants and presenters to provide your final statements or closing remarks. May I start with Dr. Cortez, please, for your final statements.
Yes. Great. So I just wanted to, I said it all already, Sunny, but I just want to open the opportunity for a discussion next time for just a food for thought that our university right now, we are in the process of forging partnerships with other universities in France, in Germany, and we're on the lookout for partner institutions for our twin joint program, twin diplomas. So I am not quite sure about the modalities, and I think it is a perfect opportunity to have Commissioner Aldrin Darilag here to know whether, and it's an opportunity for private universities partnership with the Philippines, because we know that we have good programs, particularly like we are doing AACSB accreditation, ECOWAS, AMBA, and all the works of international accreditation. And likewise, that is the trend for many HEIs to do international accreditation. And K-12 is a good thing. Every time I see somebody who says K-12 is pahirap sa bansa, pahirap sa mga mamamayan, I always had to explain that, K-12 open opportunities for our students here. Right now, we have around 30 Filipino students studying in our university from all over the Philippines, because K-12 enabled them for international scholarships, and it promoted them to, it allowed them. Before it was just De La Salle and Ateneo and maybe UP, and maybe we would get students from the second or third year level to repeat first year, but now from all over the Philippines we accept students who were from a K-12 program. And that's why those are just food for thought before I leave, and thank PIDS and ASEAN for the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Bertes. I guess that's a good evidence that we are on the right track, in terms of augmenting our basic education and eventually our higher education system.
Totally.
Okay. Dr. Darila, can you provide us with your final comments, insights?
Yeah, I think in line with the existing framework that we have developed, because of this, because of the studies conducted by our academic luminaries, I think there's still a need for us to consider other variables. Because for the information of everybody, we conducted comparative study for us to compare the nursing program of the Philippines vis-a-vis the nursing program of Canada and other neighboring countries. But still, there is one important competency that our Filipino workforce need to develop, and that is particularly our competency on culture and values. So I think it is being considered by our Canadian partners and other ASEAN partners that cultural competency of our nurses are still one important thing that needs to be revisited. And then another thing, may I also suggest to our researchers that there's really a need for us to strengthen the K-12 program so that we can fully realize the seamless transition between the basic education up to the higher education system. So the progression of knowledge and the progression of competencies on the part of the learners must be fully realized from the basic education up to the higher education system. And then the third one, I think in line with the different comments posited by Dr. Tereso Tullao, and we have Mr. Cortez and Dr. Kudia, I think we need to participate in the crafting of the implementing rules and regulations to finally support or to fully support the existing transnational higher education law, which is the RA 11448. So there is really a need for all the agencies and community partners to incorporate all our issues and concerns, some important parameters, so that we can realize and enhance IRR for the RA 11448, because we have an existing law right now, which is the Transnational Higher Education Law of 2019. So I think those are my suggestions and my recommendations to the body. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Darilag. Yeah, I guess it's worth revisiting the competencies we have been espousing through our learning institutions. So great core message. Dr. Kudia, for your final statements.
Thank you, Sunny. Okay, so with those MRAs in place intended to facilitate the labor movement and to work towards embracing best practices on standards and qualifications, we hope to continue promoting efficiency and competitiveness. And as mentioned by Commissioner Darilag, we consider those programs towards lifelong education. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess that's the bottom line, no? Us promoting the quality of our skilled workers and their competitiveness eventually in the global landscape. Dr. Tullao, for your final statements, please.
Yeah, I hope with my adversarial comments, I will still be invited by PIDS to do research, okay? But I will end
That is certain.
my comment on, a lot of people are blaming our educational sector for the poor performance of our students, particularly on the PISA. The result of our analysis is that the inequality, of the results of our PISA examiners is not school-based. It's not caused by the school qualities, but it is caused by socio-economic background. Basically, the country is poor, and that's why the families are poor and cannot attend to the educational needs of their children. Education is not only done in schools. Education is further enhanced at home. Poor families cannot provide that. With that, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Tullao. I guess we did not cover basic education, but you mentioned that that's really the anchoring, in terms of us producing really competitive and at par with standards graduates from our higher education systems. The answer that you mentioned, or the core message that you mentioned, which is it's not all about the schools training learners, but it's all about the households providing the right environment for them to learn. And that probably makes everything a lot harder. You have to address poverty subnationally to actually eventually address that quality gap in our educational system. And with those answers and insights, I guess we can close our webinar for this morning. But before we actually turn off our Zoom platform, may I mention our winners from Zoom and Facebook. For those who are just joining us this morning, we actually pick 2 participants from Zoom and 1 participant from Facebook for them to just be incentivized for actually attending our webinar. So from Zoom, we have 2 winners. First one is Mario Sunday Addison from Iloilo Science and Technology University. Second one is Ariane Rose Maghanoy from the Philippine National Volunteer Service Coordinating Agency. And from Facebook, we have Mr. Renato San Juan from DepEd Bureau of Learning Delivery. So congratulations to our 3 winners. Our PIDS tech team will coordinate with you on how to claim your prizes. So again, thank you very much to our very amazing panel for the valuable inputs and insights, and to our audience for the active participation in, of course, also in terms of the rich discussion that we had. Let's give everyone a big round of virtual applause.
Oh, thank you very much.
Maraming salamat po.
Cynthia,
So,
Mike,
once again,
thank you. Commissioner Darilag, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Domingo, Dr. Domingo, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tullao, as well. So once again, we appreciate your attendance today. The speakers' presentations will be available in our website. So go to the PIDS website and access the links on the different presentations. Meanwhile, you may download a copy of the study from the link provided. Help us improve our webinars by answering our feedback form through the link provided in the Zoom chat box and Facebook comments. Okay, so note that the e-certificate of participation will be sent to your email automatically following the submission of the completed feedback. Your feedback and recommendations will make our upcoming events much better. So keep in touch through Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for more updates. And also visit our website for you to download all our knowledge materials free of charge. We hope to have you again in our future events. Join us in another PIDS event in June featuring 2 PIDS studies. This will be on June 6 and June 27, same time, 9 to 11:30 in the morning. Please visit our webpage again for details on the upcoming events. Finally, we would like to thank our participants from the government, private sector, academe, civil society organizations, and international development organizations for joining us today. We hope you gained valuable insights from today's webinar. Let us look forward to a more inclusive and dynamic labor market in the Philippines and the ASEAN region. Thank you, everyone, and have a pleasant day ahead.
Thank you. Bye.